Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm expecting one more participant, but we'll go ahead and get started. We want to welcome you all. Thank you so much for volunteering to join this committee and help us make some important recommendations to the Board of Education. This is the first meeting of this committee ever, the first. It's just brought into existence, so it's a big moment for us, and so happy to welcome all of you here. We have one participant who is not able to make it today, and we have one who I'm still keeping an eye on to see if they join. And then Casey is here, but I know that she is not feeling well. So she's just going to be with us for a little bit and then she'll be dropping off. And I want to let you know that this meeting is being live streamed on the PPS YouTube channel, which is and recorded, and it will be on the PPS YouTube channel, which is done for all board committees and committees that report to the board. So if just want to be fully transparent, we are in a Zoom webinar and you are all listed as panelists on my end. And the tech is all new for me. And so Kara, who is from our board office, joined us today and is supporting, but she will probably be dropping off the call soon too as well. So this is the Parent Advisory Committee, distribution of donations for staffing. I am going to share. So the agenda that was posted in your Zoom invite and was also in the public meeting notice is just listed here. This is what we're planning to go through today. And I'll be sharing these slides that some of them have a lot of dense information. We're going to go through all of it. It is also always will be posted on the committee's webpage, which I also linked in that Zoom calendar invite. So if you have like another monitor and you want to open it there instead of looking at this screen, that's always available. Or if you want to be able to review materials before a meeting, it will be posted there before the meeting starts. Today, it wasn't posted until this morning. So thank you for your patience as I figure all of this out. My name is Robin Perrone. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships here at Portland Public Schools in the Office of the Superintendent. Our department does all types of fundraising and partnerships that support our schools and our students and our district. We also staff the Fund for Portland Public Schools nonprofit. It does not have its own staff, but it has its own board of directors. And I have a small team of 3, including myself, a small and mighty team that work on this for the district. I am going to go to the next slide because I would love to spend a little time having you introduce yourselves. So if you feel comfortable sharing the things that are on the slide here, I think since we're not in a room where we can just go around the room, I'll just say your first name and then you can unmute and share these things about yourself, your name and your pronouns if you choose. Then which PPS school we have 2 students on the call. So your student have attended. So it could be like if you're going to a high school now, but maybe you also went to a PPS elementary and middle school, you could name those schools for us too. That is just great for us to know. And then what drew you to apply for this committee? Like why were you interested in it? Or, just a short, brief statement of what made you interested. And then optional would be if you wanted to share that some teachers kind of do this, a rose and a thorn. So it would be kind of a benefit and a challenge about your educational experience or your students' educational experience in PPS. So that's kind of optional, but I wanted to have us, since kind of get to know each other a little more than just our name and what school we're associated with. So I'll leave that slide up so you can refer back to it as you're interested, as you're going through your own introduction. So Sei-Chin, you are the first person on my slide. Are you open to starting?
Hi, my name is Sachin Wheatley. I use he, him pronouns. I attended Hayhurst Elementary School and I'm currently attending I.W. Wells High School. And I applied to the committee because it just seemed like a fun thing to do.
Awesome. Thank you. We're so happy to have two students participating on our committee. And also an exciting tidbit is they will vote just like the rest of us. That's not always true on all of our board committees. So they have an equal vote in this committee. How about we go to our other student, Annika?
My name is Annika Hoden. I use she, her pronouns. I attended Beach Elementary, Ockley Green Middle, and I'm a 10th grader at Roosevelt right now. What drew me to apply to this committee was really I've seen teachers struggle with their class sizes, especially at the middle and high school level, and I wanted to see change in that department.
Great. Thank you. Do you want to share anything else about the rose and a thorn? You don't have to if you're good. Okay. Totally fine. How about Isla? Would you like to go?
Sure. I'm, excuse me, Isla Erchin. I use she, her pronouns. I have a Selwood Middle School son and a Dunaway Elementary School daughter. I was drawn to apply. I think it's in a really exciting time, a big change. So when something is new and starting, it's really, you can be part of forming it and creating good policy around it. So I thought it was a good opportunity. I myself am a fundraiser. I work for a nonprofit that raises money for legal aid, which helps low-income individuals afford lawyers. And we went through a similar consolidation process to being a statewide organization that I see the Fund for PPS is sort of doing something similar. In a district-wide level. So I'm interested in this process and helping it come along. In terms of a rose and a thorn, I'll start with a thorn just because I'll end on a more positive note. My son, when he started kindergarten, he was is at Dunaway, and the class was at or very close to the cap of what's allowed, something like 30 kindergarteners. Or just below it. And he just needed extra help. And that was just an incredibly high number of kids for a kindergarten. And, given that level, he just wasn't able to get the help that he needed. And it was just really hard as a parent to sort of see your kid struggle and, recognize that you can only give them, you can't get them everything. They're going to have to, figure it out. But we did. My son is now on the Rose. He's now in middle school. And I'll say that middle school has been an incredibly, incredible growth experience. He has managed to, given him this responsibility and really just a a lot of it's just been a big change, and I think a really big positive change with all of the challenges in terms of getting the homework done and going to different classes. So I've just been very, very pleased with how it's going now.
Great. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Heard a little feedback there, but Casey, would you like to go next? Are you well enough to speak? Okay. Oh, can you unmute yourself or you want me to? Let's see.
Hello,
There you go.
can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I apologize. I'm using a cell phone because we do not have a home computer. So my name is Casey Vanos, and my pronouns are she, her. I have pneumonia, hence the voice. So I saw the questions. So I saw that there was, change equals opportunity. And there's a unique opportunity to work collectively, collaboratively with other parents, students, and the school board to address things that we're seeing within the community and potentially assist financials in a way that seemed to work well and serve and serve the students, teachers, and community. Pardon me, I missed a question. So I have a kiddo who attended West Sylvan Middle School and is now a current student at Lincoln High School. One of the things that brought me working for applying to be a member of this committee was the experiences that we encountered along the way, not due to the teachers, but it was the support that was available. There are underserved students in each community, in each school, and we were one of those my daughter was one of those students, and so there was challenges that arose with special education support, and it wasn't because it just had to do with funding, and additionally like at Lincoln, relying on the school, relies on parents to provide external monies for classes because they're not receiving funding. And a lot of parents, myself included in the past, were not able to contribute. So I would volunteer when I could and I'd give what I could, but it just puts a lot of pressure, I think, within the school and on parents, and it's a challenge, but that's probably, I guess, part of the thorn. I see the rose as, a great gift to possibly bring change, assist our teachers, our students, and our parents moving forward with working with the school board for allocate funds appropriately as is decided. So I think that's a wonderful thing.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much for joining. I'm so sorry you're not feeling well.
I'm good.
Okay. If you drop off at any point, there'll be a recording and we can touch base when you're feeling well. Yeah. Okay. Audrey, would you like to go next?
Sure. My name is Audrey Gnick. I use she, her pronouns. I have a first grader and a third grader at Alameda Elementary. What drew me to apply for this committee, I'm just frustrated and fascinated by school funding in general from all levels. That's a federal, state, district, inspired by the potential to do some change and just curious to dig deeper into all those numbers. As the more obviously, as we all do, the more knowledge I have, the more that I feel like I can contribute to the conversation in the community. So I look forward to that. I think my thorn, I'll start so I can end on a positive note as well. But I think it's what we've heard echoed here is class sizes. My third grade daughter's class size is 30 individuals, which for one teacher trying to teach kids how to read, and especially in that transition between still learning how to read and having reading be the component that teaches all of the additional things like science and math and all of, having to know how to read. And with the loss of foundation supplemental dollars, like we'll no longer have EAs or the funding for EAs currently. So like, how do we help support those children who are in need within those large class sizes? Is, I think, an interesting solution for us to all try to figure out. And sorry, got a child leaving for basketball. So I think, yeah. Bye, baby. And the thorn has been that the rose has been that even within these large class sizes, the dedication that the teachers have to these children and the inspiration and the things that they teach them and that they show up every day and continue to be there for our kids is really inspiring, and as well as like the community showing up to continue to do that. So I'm just in awe of those individuals.
Thank you. David, would you like to go?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? I don't normally use Zoom. Okay, good. I use he, him pronouns. I have a daughter that went through Portland Public Schools and is now in college. But I do currently have a son who's a junior at McDaniel High School. And he started out at Vestal, so it's all in Northeast Portland. What drew me to apply to this committee? I don't often look for volunteer opportunities with the Portland Public Schools or McDaniel specifically, but when I see these committee opportunities for committees like this or some other opportunities, this one just kind of caught my eye. It has a component of having to deal with funding, and funding. Someone mentioned earlier that it's its whole ball of wax, that funding for whatever purposes. But this one in particular for staffing, I thought was really intriguing to me. And so I'd like to, have a voice in that. And, if there's some kind of diversity and equity element to that, I'd certainly like to try and keep that involved. And so anyway, it just caught my eye because it was funding related and specifically staffing. In terms of rose and thorns, now that my son is in high school, I see it much more so than it kind of makes sense. You wouldn't really see it in elementary or middle school, but the attendance issue is a really big problem. And I don't think it's necessarily McDaniel, it's probably citywide. And my son has even gotten caught up in it in some respects. It's not as bad as from what he tells me from kind of the ubiquitousness from a lot of other classes and friends that he knows, but it's really become an issue. And so I really hope that they can work on that. And I know they're trying to increase the attendance rate. In terms of a rose, I think, again, with my son being in high school, he has a different relationship with his teachers than you might as a middle school student or a elementary school student. It's a more, more mature kind of relationship. And so, this I think the teachers that he really kind of gets along well with, he has an opportunity to deal with them on, like I said, on a more mature basis. And so it's a deeper level of education for him with some of the teachers. And so I think that's a really good experience.
Thank you. That's great. Suzanne, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Suzanne Clark. I am the parent of a junior at Roosevelt High School who also, like Annika, attended Ockley Green and Beach Elementary School. My pronouns are she, her. What drew me to apply for this committee? I started the foundation at my daughter's school in 2012 when she was in a class of 31 students, PE, art, music, and their librarian were all being eliminated at the school. And I was told by the principal that was starting a foundation was the only way to get those back. And over time, I kind of switched my energy to working on funding at the state level, worked on Measure 97, which didn't pass, but would have fully funded public schools in Oregon. And then I worked on the Student Success Act. Then more recently, in full disclosure, I co-founded the Reform PPS Funding Group, which advocated for reforming foundations, and creating the district-wide foundation. So I'm really interested in talking about the discussions we can have about the role of private funds in public school, how those funds can enhance all schools in an equitable way. I'm really here to listen and learn a lot from, I'm so excited to hear from everyone in the different clusters. We share a lot of, we have a lot of similarities in what our kids are, and as parents we're going through, but I'm sure there are some differences too and things we can learn from each other. I'll start with the thorn. I think that is having a kid who knows that her community and state hasn't demonstrated their support for her public education. She's very aware of that and is frustrated by that. And I mean that from a funding perspective. Our schools have been underfunded by $22 billion since just 1999. So it's a major disinvestment in our public schools has occurred. And then the rose is that she loves school and she loves her teachers. She has been exposed to, she's just had wonderful experiences in public school, in Portland Public School. And I'm very grateful for that. And so grateful for the teachers and staff at PPS for doing what they can with so little.
Thank you. And I have known Suzanne for the last several years as an advocate for this change, and I'm glad to have her here as well. All of the rest of you are this first time I'm meeting you, so just thought I'd disclose that. Elisa, would you like to go?
Hi, my name is Elisa. I have two kids, a daughter who's a sophomore at Grant and a son who is in 7th grade at MLC. So I'm representing in this group all of the multiple pathways to graduation and alternative schools. Since I've been a parent in the MLC community for the past 10 years. What drew me to apply? is that I've spent many, many years fundraising. When like my kids were younger, doing the auction every year in order to just squeeze just a little bit of money out of this tiny community to pay for just something, and then giving the money to what used to be the all hands raised, and then being told that our school wasn't eligible to receive any of the grants. And then the schools that did get grants, they couldn't, it wasn't enough money to really be impactful. So I felt like it is this like the funding, I need to dig deeper and I want to learn more because it seems incomprehensible from my end. And I've seen other school communities. I worked at Lincoln last year, so I got to see what does a very wealthy school community look like, and what does when they have a parent fund that just, if you tell them you need something, it just appears. Where that is, it's just the differences in the schools. Okay, so and my thorn would be with the school, with my kids' educational experience. I have neurotypical kids in schools that at MLC that where it's just such a variety of kids. And wait, that's not a thorn, that's a rose. Okay, and I would say my thorn is the churn of principals and admin, and my rose is how wonderful the teachers are. As I volunteer in the school, we're just consistently, these teachers are, I don't know what they can do, and they're so encouraging to us as parents and teaching us how to raise the kids. So I am indebted, and yeah, I want to figure out how we can make this mess better.
Thank you. Daniel Levine.
Hi there.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So my name is Daniel Levine. I go by he, him, his pronouns. I have a 5-year-old who goes to Bridal Mile Elementary and Kindergarten in Southwest Portland. What drew me to the committee? I mean, I really have very little to no knowledge or experience in funding or government or even the school system. And I guess I'll just transition into sort of a mixture of the rose and thorn, is that my son is level 3 autistic. And so just a few months ago, we weren't even sure he could go to school at all. And so he is now flourishing at his school and loves it there and loves the people there. But it's definitely put a new emphasis in my life about learning about the importance of the school system and being educated about how it gets funded and how to make a difference. And maybe I can sort of bring a bit of a lens of sort of special education and communication and behavior classrooms in the staffing. And I guess just throwing in an aside, this the political and social climate right now, just an increased excitement about being involved and doing whatever we can do to control our communities in a different way.
Thank you. I think we've got everybody. There were 2 people who could not make it tonight. One from Franklin High School, and then one from Benson High School as well. Parents. And so we'll have them introduce themselves next time. But you can see we have a broad representation from our district and different experiences and levels of knowledge coming into the conversation. So I think we have an exciting and big task in front of us. So we will go on to kind of I wanted to review the public meeting rules and quorum because of being a committee that reports to the board. We're subject to the same rules that the board is, which means that everything that we say and do is public information. The meetings are being live streamed, like I'd mentioned, and they're being recorded. I mentioned that as people were coming on. I just wanted you to be aware, you know. But also, anytime we have a group of people from this committee talking to each other, it constitutes a public meeting. So when the meetings end, we don't want to keep having conversations, which we can't really do because we're not in a room together or on Zoom. But even if we were doing something like group emails that were going back and forth, that constitutes a public meeting. So I'm just learning about some of this nuance myself. I'm not going to read all of this, but that's kind of the gist of it. And you can go back and reference this. We have 11 members. This says 12. So 6 members of this committee constitutes a quorum. I am not a voting member. I'm a staff person. So that is how it will work. And each person will have 1 vote, and majority vote is needed to pass. So that's just like the basic rules of engagement here. Are there any questions about that or comments? We have some, we don't need to decide today, but we have the ability to decide if we want public comment. I'm leaning towards having public comment be only written just because we have a limited window of time to make our decisions, but that could be revisited as a group if we want to allow people to do public comment testimony at the beginning of our meetings. So just throwing that out there. So this next slide is PPS agreements. Can everyone see that? I'm not seeing exactly what you're seeing, but yeah, okay. So I thought that we could go through these, and then if we have any that we want to add, and I will just take notes, and then at the next meeting I'll have our other, if we have others, because this is a PDF, so I'm not going to be able to like type as we go. But is there anybody who would like to volunteer to read the first 3 all on the left side of the slide? So I'm not talking the whole time. Suzanne? Okay.
Respect each other and start in a place of trust. Be willing to do things differently and experience discomfort. Expect and accept non-closure.
Great. Thank you. Does anyone want to read that middle column for me? Casey? If I click it, it will unmute you. Oh, there you go.
I'm on a phone. I apologize. Speak your truth responsibly. Center experiences of our Black and Native students. Stay engaged.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'll read the last one.
Okay, perfect.
Listen to understand and believe, recognize and celebrate successes, other agreements.
Great. Thank you so much. Can anyone think of something else that they would like to add, or you can also reflect on this and you could email me, or we could revisit it at the next meeting also. So. Casey, do you have one to add? Looks like you're unmuted.
Oh, pardon me. Maybe something along the lines, I'm not sure how this would be worded, but that a collaborative understanding and respect without making assumptions, like for, certain parties and peoples, and making judgments, like when we think of whether a student that attends this school is wealthy, or that somebody isn't, just that there's more of a unified idea there, maybe like with assumptions, I suppose. Possible. I'm not sure how to word that, but hopefully that makes sense to others.
I wrote down understanding and respect without making assumptions. Do you think that sums it up?
I think that, yes, that sounds great.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Does anyone else have any other ideas of things they would like added to our meeting agreement? Okay, well, we can, next time I'll add that one in the open slot, and then if you have others that come up, feel free to reach out. So this we may need to come back to. I don't know if you're going to feel ready to do this right now, but I just want to put out there that we will need to select a chair and co-chair for our committee. And the responsibility of the chair is to review the agenda with staff, myself, prior to the meetings. So that would mean I would draft something, and then like a week or a few days before the meeting, we would review it and see if there was anything else we wanted to change or move around. And then the chair would also facilitate the meetings. This with my support, so this might be, following the agenda in terms of like introducing guest speakers or different topics, or so on and so forth. And the responsibility of the co-chair, or sometimes referred to as a vice chair, is more of a backup to the chair, like that they would take on those responsibilities when the chair is absent. Or in some committees, I have seen it where there's two co-chairs and they do it together. So that's also an option. So if just kind of curious if anyone is interested in serving as a chair or co-chair of the committee, you could just raise your hand, and then I think we'll come back to the vote part. Okay, so we have Sachin, Annika, and Casey raising their hands. Anyone else? Okay. And did you, the three of you, did you have a preference of which one you want it to be, or do we want to do the model of the co-chairs? I'm kind of open to input here from anyone.
I'd probably rather co-chair just because, I'm not sure how much time I'll necessarily have between meetings to prepare, given that like I still have to do schoolwork and everything. But I can guarantee that I'll be at every meeting, so I think being co-chair will be particularly useful because I know that I'll be able to be there if anyone's not able to make it.
Great, thank you. And Casey, were you interested in either one of the positions, or?
Yes, interested. I would be open to being a co-chair, would consider a chair as well, if I had more, I guess, more information, but a co-chair would be my first choice.
Okay, gotcha. Great. And what about you, Annika?
I'm open to either.
Okay. All right.
Robin, can I just say that I love the two students both volunteered?
I know, I know.
Me too.
Very cool. Okay, I think that maybe we will move on and come back to this if we want it, once we kind of get through the information and see if you're still interested after you see what the information I've compiled here today. And if there's any questions or anyone else wants to throw their name in the hat. Okay. And then just to, when we vote, it's kind of the normal kind of rules of a board, but which is usually there's one person who makes a motion, which means like the motion is to however you state it, and then another person seconds, and then we all vote, and like we'll probably just use raising hands because it's easier when we're on Zoom, but that's kind of the standard. Okay, so this is the policy that created the need for this committee that we're on. So there is a link on so we have that committee webpage that I referenced, which is in the calendar invite and in the emails that I sent you. And you could Google it on pps.net if you're trying to find it. I mean, you can search. It's hosted on our strategic partnerships webpage on pps.net. And then there's a link on the left for this committee. And there's a link on there to this policy, which is under the board policies also section. District-wide advocacy and fundraising policy passed the Board of Education in May of 2024. And in the intro paragraph, I just wanted to call out that this policy is designed to foster a spirit of community and shared purpose and facilitate collective impact on behalf of PPS students. Given our common mission and vision to the district encourages parents and community groups to advocate, fundraise, and support improving the educational experience district-wide in alignment with our racial equity and social justice values. So to me, that is really the what, what we're doing here. And you will notice on your own closer reading of the policy that it prominently puts the advocacy piece out there, which is really around advocating for more public funding or other supports for public education that shouldn't just be the responsibility of parents to fundraise and fill gaps. And I heard several of you bring that up in your remarks, and I definitely think that is part of the intention behind the policy and the way that it's worded. The Fund for Portland Public Schools now has an advocacy page up on their website as of today. So we have been working on that in collaboration with PPS Government Affairs. We have one person who that's their role is like going down to Salem and being aware of all the bills and, and so we will be posting updates on that page for others to take action, be aware of like what are opportunities. There is the big state school fund, and then there are individual bills that can vastly impact the amount of money coming to PPS and other school districts. So we track all of those. And some of them are more about like values and education, and they're not all having to do with money. I don't want to make it sound like that, but you know what I mean. So the there is more to this policy. We're going to dig into a couple other pieces as we go, but I just wanted to lay that as a foundation as we get started here. And then this is the timeline that how we are trying to make a decision by spring break. So this lists the meetings that I've put on the calendar, which are all Wednesday evenings. They're not every week, but these 2 in March are back to back because of spring break. There isn't like a week in between. There is a possibility that we may need to add, you know, the first week in March as well. This is a very ambitious timeline for the task in front of us. I do recognize that. The reason for the fast timeline is our goal is for the to make the recommendation to the Board of Education on April 8th, and we have to give them 2 weeks notice with our written materials and for all that processes to happen. What it allows us to do if we make our recommendation by early April is to get the word out to the PPS community about where these funds are going and engage in education about the opportunity for people to contribute to that goal, if with more fundraising, more collaborative fundraising, that is going to look very different. But what I can tell you as the person who, you know, overseeing the bank account for the fund for PPS, I can tell you there is not a lot of funds coming in right now. So I think a lot of people are waiting to see what is this district-wide foundation and whether they want to contribute to it. It is not the only purpose that the fund for PPS is fundraising for, but it is, you know, we're still getting other donations and we're doing fundraising with corporate partnerships and grants and all the things that we have been doing since it launched in 2019. But the parent fundraising component, that was the local school foundation, was the largest share of money that was coming into the fund for PPS. And that has pretty much ceased since this policy. There is not active fundraising. So that's the purpose of the timeline. It could get pushed if necessary, but I'm hopeful that we'll be able to work through this on that timeline. The board also does not meet every week. They meet every other week. And so, you know, as you get closer to May, there's very few like opportunities left. Suddenly we're talking about summer vacation, which is hard to believe considering there's probably going to be snow tonight. So, but time just ticks by. So that is the timeline that we're working with. So here we have a slide that is the history of school funding in Oregon. We are not going to get into like everything to do with school finance, but I know that, you know, when I moved here 10 plus years ago and put my kids in PPS, I really had no idea like what we were stepping into. And so I think it's important context to understand why we are in the situation we are, where we feel such a crunch and that there's not enough money for basic things that should seem like very basic operations and facilities and such. So I actually wonder if Suzanne, if you might help me out and like highlight this slide and give me a chance to break talking.
I will do my best. This is great practice because I have to do it next week when we're hosting an advocacy event at Roosevelt High School with 4 state legislators to talk about public funding for schools. So the real change that occurred in Oregon public schools happened in 1990. That is the big year. That is when ballot measure 5 passed. It was a measure that had the effect of changing which entity, local funding versus state funding, which entity funded public schools the most. So prior to 1990, approximately a little shy of 70% of funding came from local property taxes. Portland Public Schools were very well funded back then. And people were upset about how much they were paying in property taxes and how quickly those taxes were going up. So some folks decided to push this ballot measure 5 and flip that. So they capped what property taxes, they put a cap on property taxes. They also capped how much of property taxes could actually go into public education. And the result was that now 60 to 70% of funding for public schools came from the state legislature, and only 30% could come from local property taxes. This had the positive benefit of equalizing funding across the state, because you can imagine that in Portland, we had a lot more revenue coming from property taxes than in eastern rural cities or towns in the state of Oregon. So those communities got a lot more funding, but the outcome hit Portland really hard, and we saw a massive decrease in revenue coming to our public schools. Coincidentally, it also didn't have the effect of really slowing down increases in property taxes as the people who pushed for this measure had hoped for. So it was like a double whammy. It didn't work on property taxes, and our schools lost a lot of revenue. Measure 50 is just added more to the dilemma of like, or it further limited, how local property taxes could be spent on public schools. As I mentioned when I introduced myself, we did have Measure 97, where we tried to do a corporate activities tax that would have raised $3 billion, but businesses opposed that. And then in 2019, the Student Success Act was successfully passed with the support of businesses. That did increase the Student Success Act increased the amount of money coming into all public schools, but it's very strict as to how those funds can be used. Districts do not get to use those funds willy-nilly. They're told, and there's a lot of accountability that comes with how they use those funds. Some folks say that the Student Success Act actually isn't at all additive to revenue for our public schools, because our costs have gone up so much. And I don't know what you have here. So for issues, schools must do more or less while student needs and educational standards continue to rise and now compete. Okay, so yes, the other outcome of having to get most of our revenue from the state is that we have to compete with really important social or government funded programs like transportation, healthcare programs, drug and alcohol addiction, homelessness programs. So when you approach a legislator and say, why can't you fund public schools more? I guarantee you the response will be, well, we don't have the money. We'd have to take it from these other important programs. So we're being pitted against other important programs by our legislators. And ultimately, the state probably needs to figure out a way to increase its overall revenue in order to fund everything that it needs to fund. Unfortunately, next year, you've probably all heard, we're looking at 40 million in cuts for PPS. That's after cutting 30 million this year, 10 million the prior year, and 30 million the year before that. And I will tell you, as a parent who's been in this system for 13 years, it has been ongoing, the cuts. The 40 million next year will equate to about 200 FTE. 200 FTE equals 1/3 of the staff we pay for by our local option levy. That is a levy that locally Portlanders vote to support to purchase over 600 teachers for our schools. And we always support that levy. And now, because of the shortage in state funding, we're going to lose 200 of those teachers potentially that Portlanders wanted to have for our kids. It's a testament to how much Portland supports public schools. But it's really hard when to keep that trust and that support when it feels like they're not getting any better. Did I do okay, Robin?
That was great. Thank you so much. Does anyone have discussion or questions that they want to raise? Yeah.
I'm curious. Do you know what the total budget is for PPS right now? Just so we can get an idea of how much 40 million is, like year on year.
Yeah, the big number that they talk about is $1 billion, but that includes the facilities. How about we bring that forth for the next meeting? We'll provide some more of the total. I was trying to remember the percentage that the 40 million represents. I think it's in the single digits, but I can't remember the exact amount. So there's also a web page that PPS put up of the proposed cuts, and it has more detail on the budget. So if we have time, we'll get to that, or I can email it out. So that is the context. Oh, Daniel, did you have something?
I guess I just had maybe a dumb question that so when 40 million is taken out of PPS, is that going to something else in the government, or that just means that we just don't have the money to do the programs that we were going to do before, or have the teachers that we thought we were going to have?
So not all the cuts are going to be the teachers, but there is 200 positions that are proposed to be eliminated. A big issue is that the cost of PERS went up. So that's the retirement system. And I don't really understand it exactly, but when all of the school districts were hit with an increase in PERS, that they were notified in November. And for PPS, that's $20 million more has to be paid out through the retirement system. When I asked the CFO to explain it to me, she said it's based on returns because it's 2 years behind. So it was based on, because I said what I see in investment returns as they keep going up. So, so it's like a lag. And that was what was happening 2 years ago with the investments. I don't really understand that part. And there's also declining enrollment. So the way that we are paid from the state school fund is on a per student basis. So as the enrollment declines, the amount we're getting from the state declines. So those are two major factors. There's more to it than that, but
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let me talk a bit about the fund for Portland Public Schools and what the nonprofit is. So it is a 501c3 that was established in 2019. The previous PPS Foundation was started in the 1990s when this Measure 5 passed, and that was when it was in response to those decreases that the board said, sure, if you can raise money and contribute to staff, you go forth, parents. You know, that was kind of the message. It was also, though, the PPS Foundation also did advocacy, you know, around like how are we going to respond to this? How are we? And so that was a big coming together of the community as it began to be clear how much the money was reduced. The PPS Foundation eventually became All Hands Raised, which was referenced earlier. And that organization is still around, although they serve all of Multnomah County, not just PPS. And when we started the fund for PPS in 2019, All Hands Raised handed back the oversight of those school foundations to the fund for PPS. So that's kind of the to understand what these different entities are. There also was a sharing percentage that was a board policy or a resolution, wasn't technically a policy, where for school foundations that fundraise for supplemental staff, they needed to contribute 33% of the funds above 10,000 to share with other schools. So that was also referenced, I think, when somebody was talking about their understanding of the system. So though that 33% that was put in a separate pot is then redistributed as grants that were called the PPS Parent Fund. And they were awarded based on the school demographics. And so this is a hyperlink in the slide deck that you could go to see those awards. The amount of them really varied from year to year. Like some years it was 30,000, and then since COVID, it was kind of decreasing to be more like $10,000 to the schools that were awarded. So as you can tell, that's really not enough money to hire a position. So those funds were kind of used as other supplemental money by those schools. But with the new policy that was passed in May by the board, it really eliminates both the school foundations and the PPS parent funds in the way that they were functioning previously. So this year is the last year that schools are still spending out their school foundation dollars, and the PPS parent fund awards are being spent out. And then the money that we're doing is for next year, which we'll get to. And then this other website, so we have, if you go to the Champion website, it kind of explains the transition and then the school foundations. there's a link there where you can click on the link and see the total history of giving by school, and those PPS Parent Fund awards are also shared there. So we're not going to get into all of that right now, but I wanted to kind of explain what it is and where you can find more information.
Where was that again?
So those are on fundforpps.org, and on this slide, these are hyperlinks, or you could type those in to a web page. And then the multi-year kind of community advocacy that led to this current shift of the district-wide fundraising model. I mean, there already was the district-wide foundation, but there wasn't like, because it still allowed for this school foundation model and the parent funds, it kind of created a situation where schools were fundraising for their own school. And so this really shifts it to be like, if everyone is contributing towards a collective impact, we can do something as a district that isn't solely focused on just raising money in one school. That even though there was the sharing model, as was referenced, it wasn't equitable across the district. What schools had to work with, and there were schools that were completely left out. You know, they weren't able to fundraise and they weren't receiving parent funds. So that is kind of the nutshell of a kind of a more complicated story, but that kind of gives you like how it all, what are the different terms and what those different pots are and how it functioned. Casey, I see you have your hand raised. And then we'll go to Audrey. Here, let me try to do this. If I unmute you, there you go.
Thank you. I'm operating from a cell phone, so I apologize. A question, and I'm backtracking a bit. With the nonprofit that was founded, is that how, like, there are equity FTEs and those are allocated? Is that?
That's separate. That is from the general fund. So that was kind of why the equity fund was renamed PPS Parent Fund, because it was getting confused with equity allocations that the district was making as well.
Okay. So with what's the question that because I from what I understand, and I'm still learning, but with FTE and then like PPS funded like partnerships, that how are those determined? Does that go through the school board, and is it through the nonprofit as well?
No, so the nonprofit is really solely privately fundraised dollars.
Okay.
So it's either grants or corporate gifts or individual donations.
And then, but with the PPS funded like partnerships, I guess with the, some schools have those. I think it's an important thing. I was just curious how that's determined, if that's purely through the school board or something else.
Yeah, the superintendent's leadership team really proposes the budget, and then the board kind of responds to and passes it. So, and the partnerships, so we have a department, the Racial Equity and Social Justice Department has contracts with many culturally specific nonprofits and other nonprofits in the city of Portland that provide services in our schools. And that comes out of the general fund as well.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's the partnerships you're referring to.
Yes, yes.
Sometimes there's other partnerships too, like a school may establish a partnership with a local business or
Yeah.
corporation, but
That
yeah.
does it. I was like SEI and
Yeah,
like NAYA and such. I was just curious. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
sure. And some of it is paid for from Multnomah County, the SUN program, but the district also pays a large sum of those contracts directly. Audrey?
I think my question is going to kind of piggyback on what Casey was asking, but just trying to dig into these numbers and have a better understanding. Would you be able to share a link to where the data is for the PPS allocation per student per school? I don't know exactly where that is, and I just want to overlay that with these numbers that we're looking at.
Yes.
I have it from previous years, but I don't have it from this year, and I'm not sure.
I'm not sure if they've produced that for this year.
We're
but
still working with 2023 numbers then for that.
Yeah. I will find out.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Sachin?
What's an FTE? Sorry if this is like a really obvious question.
Oh,
Just
full-time equivalent. So it's kind of like a full-time staff person. So people use that term
okay.
FTE
So
instead of saying, yeah.
It's like a work equivalent unit.
Yeah, so it could be like it could be a teacher or it could be a full-time position in schools, or that's primarily what people are saying when they say FTE. Suzanne?
You're on mute.
Thank you. To respond to Sachin, the FTEs, I think Robin, correct me, but is usually considered to be $120,000. Is that correct? For what to fund one FTE?
The average that they typically use for a PAT member, the average is 100,000, and for other support positions they use 50,000. That's sort of like an average that is when you're comparing the number of FTE in a school, that's kind of the numbers they're using. Although it may be up to 120 now, but traditionally that's what it's been.
Is that salary or salary and benefits? Sorry, just trying to understand that number.
Salary and benefits, and it's an average. So, like a first year teacher, they're going to come in much lower, and then, yeah.
And it used to be that when FTE was funded by foundations, the principal could decide. So if like 100,000 was raised by the foundation, the principal could decide to get more out of that money by deciding which FTE to apply it to. But that changed. I don't know the year, I think it was 2 years ago, and that if funds were raised, then they would have to be allocated to the staff that they were used to acquire. So you could no longer take 100,000 and get 3. I don't know. It's very complicated, but there maybe you can elaborate on that. But before, I wanted to say thank Audrey for raising the question about per student funding. Robin, I'm wondering if we can get, even if it's not totally ready, if we can get an idea of the per student funding, because it's my understanding that the general fund equity funding allocation, so the non-private fundraising equity funding allocation, that changed dramatically this year. So the numbers reflected in the 2023 spreadsheet are not close to what they are this year.
Right.
And I actually am happy to share with this group a spreadsheet I created of equity funding over the years and how it's changed and what it is now.
What do you mean by equity funding? Can you?
Yeah, so it's so confusing, right? There's through the fund for PPS, fundraising and local school foundation fundraising, there used to be something called parent equity funding or grants. And those were private funds raised by parents that were all put into a pot and then redistributed to schools that couldn't fundraise for themselves for the most part. But that became confusing because the district also had what Robin was talking about, an RESJ department, which decided its equity allocations from the general funds it received from the state. So even before private funds come into the picture, PPS is making a decision based on its RESJ policy to give some schools more than other schools funding per student. And so it's that equity funding that I'm talking about, which changed this year. More schools received it than had in the past. And so it would be really, I think, if we are going to get into the nitty gritty of per student funding, which I'm not sure is entirely necessary, but could be convinced otherwise, is that we have accurate data on what that per student funding is.
I just think it's important if we're looking at the whole picture to really look at the whole picture. I mean, just for instance, like when I dug into the data last year for K through 5s comparison, Richmond was the lowest funded by PPS. So basically, I'll say it in a different way, but PPS allocates a certain amount of money per pupil to each school. And there's an equity lens that's placed over that. So if you go to a K through 5, not every K through 5 student's receiving the same amount. So last year, this was 2 years ago from the 2023 data. Richmond students received about and this is a graph and I don't have the exact number, but about $7,000 per student at the lowest funded school. Whitman at the highest funded school was at, sorry, I'm scrolling over, just over 14,000. And so I think, and you say that has changed this year, and I'm excited to see that. But I do think that there is I mean, when we're looking at 7,000 to 14,500 number, that's over double per student. So I think it's important to look at that data when we're looking at the whole picture.
Yeah, I wanted to say it also is, it's not just the equity allocation that you're seeing as a difference there. It's also based on the number of students in that school, because you need a principal in every school, you need an office. There's like standard allocations that every school needs to operate. And when you have decreasing enrollment, that's happening in a lot of our elementary schools, the amount per student is going up because the amount to keep that school open stays the same. And then there's also Title I dollars that are a part of the dollar per student when they're taking a total of everything that's going into that school. And Title I dollars are federal dollars that have a certain formula of which schools qualify based on low income. And also those, we're getting word that those are likely to decrease by 25%, if not more, under this administration as soon as next year. And so there's a lot of things in flux. But I think can I just get through the rest of the slides? I think it may answer some of these questions, and then I will compile a list of like other data and things that I will share out with you via email that you could take a look at. Not everything is going to be easy to digest in a slide, but I kind of wanted to give you a foundation of information for us to start working from. I just have a couple more slides here. So, and I'm also looking at the time. We're getting close to, we have like 7 minutes about. So in last school year, the school foundations fundraised $3,400,000 and some thousand. So you can see the exact dollar amount on this slide. That was kind of a bump in fundraising since COVID. Like pre-COVID, it wasn't unusual for school foundations to raise about $4 million, but we saw a large decrease after COVID. With it being the last school year to have a school foundations, we saw a bump up. So that was the number that was raised last year. And out of that, the 1,335,170 was set aside. That was that 33% that was taken out of the money. That is the set aside for redistribution. So this school year, 2024-25, is the last year for schools to expend their funds from the school foundations and their PPS parent funds, so the grants and in both types. And so that 1 million plus a little bit is what we are talking about redistributing. So that is why we have that money available to launch this new model. And to get into another data point that I think is maybe of interest to folks is like, how did schools use that money in school foundations? And it really is a variety of ways, but the most common way was for educational assistance. So those are like the teachers' aides in the classroom. I just wanted to give you this number here, that with 43,000 students in PPS in over 80 schools, it would require over $4 million to add one full-time educational assistant in each school. So while $1 million is a lot of money, and it sounds like a lot of money for us to like invest and get to choose where this goes, it's really not going to be enough to allocate it by school. The recommendation here is going to be that we invest more on a programmatic basis for the like types of services and positions that will be additive to our students. And so over the next few meetings, we'll have more information about what those opportunities could be, and we will be listening to what your interests are as well. So that is our, this first part is in italics is taken directly from the policy. Donations shall be accepted from local school foundations, so they can still operate and donate money, but it needs to all then go into one pot and then be redistributed through this formula. And the formula for the distribution of any funding to individual schools shall be developed in advance of the school year by a parent advisory committee, that's us, shared with school administrators for feedback. That was in that timeline. And then a recommendation made to the Board of Education for its approval. So the board has the final say, like we are making a recommendation. And so that is our main purpose. That is our charge, to make that recommendation to the Board of Education for the distribution of the fundraised dollars for staff positions. Additional funding raised by June 30 of this year could be added to that amount. I mean, that is a possibility. And so what we need to also be thinking about is that the recommendation that you make as a committee will have the potential to galvanize the community toward future fundraising efforts. Otherwise, if it may be like a one-time thing, until, so it really needs to be thinking about the we need to be thinking beyond our own school, our own experience of like what's going to galvanize our community and have an impact on student experience. So the plan for the next meeting is to have maybe the next 2 meetings to have different district leaders present to you, describing the current state and future opportunities for your consideration and deliberation. And so I have been speaking with the leaders of our Office of Teaching and Learning to be able to come to our next meeting and tell you about what they are doing to improve education for our students, and what some opportunities could be for staff positions. In the meantime, I will be gathering some of the data that you requested today, sharing more information out with you, and we will be sure to leave at least 30 minutes at the end of our next meeting to talk about what we heard and who else you might want to hear from. We're trying to like give you a foundation of like background of how we got to where we are, what's our charge, and then kind of like what is current state will be next time with some district administrator leaders who are like our experts in education, which is not precisely me. So how does that sound to everyone? We're exactly at 7 p.m. Like, how are we feeling? Thank you so much for.
Is it possible to stick around and ask more questions? If we have
Yes.
time.
Yeah, we could, how about like 5 more minutes? Is that okay?
Maybe. I think Casey had a question.
Bill. Why don't you go ahead, Ela, and we'll try to unmute her. She'll go next.
Sure. I had 2 questions. The first was just that 1 million was raised in 23-24. So does that mean that the schools, the non-fundraising schools, didn't get their equity from the parent fund this year? They didn't get that grant? Because if it's
it's always
fundraising
1
last
year. Yeah, it's a good question. It's always 1 year behind. So
Okay.
they got the grant for this year from the previous years.
Okay.
So, but that was a decision made by the school board in September, when we were showing like what we had, how to make this transition. So this is a transition year,
Sure. And my second question was a little bit more about, it sounds like we're being asked to decide what to do with this very specific $1 million, and we're only meeting 4 times. But as you said, it's a transition year, and there's so many things up in the air in terms of what one fundraising will look like. So how are we structuring our decision about current money versus ongoing policy questions? Like, how are we addressing ongoing policy, or are we just like, I pick this program? I mean, I imagine we're doing policy, but it seems like we're very few meetings.
Well, I mean, the policy body of the district is the school board. And so it was the policy committee that wrote the policy after, really like 3+ years of deliberation.
I don't mean we would come up with the policy, but just like it says, a formula for the distribution of any funding to individual schools. So what that is formulated in a way that is not year specific. Because it sounds like we just got 1 million and it's going to be very unique to this year. And in order to make a general decision on that, we're going to need more information and more time to be like, in general, we think the funding formula should take these things into account.
So the committee will be ongoing. We are in we're off to kind of a late start, right? This school year in this transition year. I would envision that the formula that we're doing will be for this $1 million and the recommendation would probably be to continue that for the following years to give it a chance to work. But the committee could decide to make a different recommendation, like next January for the following year, based on there's so many changing circumstances like the federal government and so on. So it's kind of a both and. It's like deciding where this money will do the most good for next year and for fundraising to continue towards that goal. Because unless people know that where their money is going, they're also not as likely to contribute to it. And that's kind of the situation we've been in for this transition year so far. Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense. I appreciate that.
Okay. Casey? I think you're unmuted now.
Oh, that was, you just answered my question.
Oh, that was your question.
That was it. Well, it was part of my question. So a good ask and a good answer, and I appreciate it. And I have changed my decision, so I'd be open to being the chairperson if no one else is interested. And I'm not sure when we'll decide that, but I'll throw that out there. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Suzanne, did you have your hand raised too, or?
I did, but I lowered it.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, well, I think that we should begin the next meeting with the vote on the chair and co-chair. Since we're already at 7:05 and we do have a couple more members who weren't here today. And I will be email. I need to check with my board liaison to see if I can email you data. I think I can share data beforehand. We just can't reply and have a dialogue. And whatever I send you will also be posted on that public webpage for the committee as for materials for the next meeting. But I can send it to you ahead of time so that you can digest it. That's my intention. Yeah. So thank you so much for sticking with us without even a break and such a long meeting and all of that dense data. I promise I won't be speaking for so much at future meetings, and appreciate all of you very much for being here. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.